Good morning. I'm John Lux. I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida, and welcome to another edition of Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, and relationship building in Florida's screen production industry. Today, we're having a discussion about AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. In a moment, our guest will introduce herself, and then we'll ask a few questions. During that time, we're going to ask that everybody keep their microphones on mute to avoid background noise. After we've gotten through our initial questions, we'll open it up to the audience for questions and conversation. At that time, we want you to use the hand raising function, if you can, on the bottom toolbar, so we can call on you. We want this to be conversational and interactive, but we obviously don't want everybody trying to talk at one time. We're going to ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of the fairness to others that want an opportunity as well. Film Florida Fridays are free, as you all know, but we hope you'll consider donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. That donation link will be in the chat box, and you can always find that on our website as well. With that, I want to introduce our guest, Sheena Fowler, and have her introduce herself and give her kind of a brief bio. Sheena, go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sheena Fowler. My current title, which I've jumped careers and it still feels a little funny to say it, but I'm the Vice President of Strategic Engagements and Business Development at a tech startup called Red 6. What Red 6 does is we've created the world's first augmented reality platform that works in outdoor high-speed environments like roller coasters and fighter jets. So we're bending the boundaries of what augmented reality and mixed reality technology can do and starting to put it in different places where we haven't been able to experience before. Now, prior to this, I spent 12 years at the Orlando Economic Partnership serving as the film commissioner. My bestie, Lindsay, over here, I see in the audience, and Christy, my goodness, I couldn't have done it without them. It was a long time, and I simply adored it. Prior to that, I worked in production. My whole career prior to this has been production. So being with Red 6 is the first time that I'm this far away from traditional film, but I've got some fun projects that I'll talk to you guys about in a little bit where I'm starting to pull the entertainment back in, and it's an amazing journey. So I'm excited about this session today.
Well, Sheena, let's start with a little bit of context, a little bit of definitions for some people that may not be as familiar with the AR and VR and the mixed definitions. So why don't we start there? Can you define like AR, VR, mixed media, those type of things, just so people have an understanding of what we're referencing?
Yeah, so virtual reality is the complete immersion. So that's when you're in a device like an Oculus, and everything around you is virtual. So you can't see the outside world. Everything that you're going to see is now digitally reproduced or created. It doesn't have to be reproduced. It could be completely new. So that's all your full virtual world. And that's really, it's extraordinary to see what the mind does in a virtual world. I've tried to step off a building in a virtual world and I can't do it. I've been trying this for 10 years now. One of these days I'm going to jump off that building. It's not going to happen. But you're fully immersed. Now, augmented reality is when you have a digital overlay over the real world. So you're now seeing the full world around you. You're real, the people in front of you are real, but there's a digital overlay. So that's when we're talking about a lot of the AR that's being used today. Like a lot of people experienced it with Google Glass. Snapchat's a great example of augmented reality. A lot of what we started with was augmented reality. And then you start to get into mixed reality, and my goodness, there are a lot of different definitions of this. The most recent one that I've wrapped my brain around is when the augmented reality is interactive with the people that are still in the real world. So now your digital entities are fully interacting, whether that's an AI character that's going to interact with you, whether that's, in my case, we do a lot of defense work. So we're doing training. So the plane that you're training against that's digital is now going to interact with you. So there's a bit of a quick overview of what all these different things can do.
Excellent. Now, and you mentioned you have a long history of working in the traditional content creation field. Talk about the transition between what you did for a very long time and then moving over to your world at Red 6. how did your previous career help you, and what were some of the biggest learning curves or challenges that you had?
Well, I 100% got hired because I have a film background. My CEO, Dana Robinson, recognizes that the film industry produces some of the most extraordinary people on the face of the planet. We're hardworking, we're resilient, we have a completely different understanding of what it takes to get the job done than most people. So he loves hiring film people, and there's a few of us in this company that have that entertainment background, including his co-founder came from entertainment. So honestly, I don't think there's much difference when it comes to what I was doing before in film. I've always been on the production side. So I've always been production coordinating, producing, even in film commission, same thing, right? You're producing. And so my role here at Red 6 in sales, and I run the office, I'm the site lead for the Orlando office. I'm still producing. I'm still able to look at extreme timelines, impossible tasks with really quirky personalities. And guess what? That's my special sauce. That's what I've been doing since my first days in film production. That's something I got very used to, and I don't get thrown. I'm cool under pressure, thanks to all of the crazy things that we end up doing on set, and so it's really become quite a benefit. And when you look at we worked on a project with Disney a year or two ago, and all of a sudden, all of my previous film, my indie life, right, when I was creating and writing and scripting, all of that came into play. So I got to write a script for a roller coaster augmented reality experience, and it was same thing. All of those same film skills came into play. So there's definitely some skill transfer between the two, depending on what type of job roles you're looking at.
Okay. And now, how do you see the emergence of, the quote unquote metaverse impacting traditional models within film, television, digital media production, marketing, like all the things that the traditional content creation industry is?
So there's a bunch of different definitions of metaverse,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the one that's gotten the most attention, that has been in the movies. The way Red 6 describes a metaverse is completely different from what most people have seen. We define a metaverse. I'm sorry, they're picking up the trash behind my building. So you're probably hearing that noise. They'll be done soon. It's recycling day. So we define the metaverse as an augmented reality or mixed reality universe. So it's something, a space, and in defense, ours is classified, right? So it's a classified space that's private only to those that are interacting with the game, and it becomes a multiplayer video game. For our use case for planes, we're in the sky, but it's totally locked down. The players are defined, right? It's not something that you're going to go and live in, but it's a universe in which you can go into it. Everything that happens in there is persistent. So if you have something happen in the day one training exercise, all of those same results are there for day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And so that persistence, and that makes it that universe, that metaverse, right, to where all of those things are able to live. We think an augmented reality or a mixed reality metaverse is far more realistic than the full immersive VR metaverse, in which everyone's going to disappear and become on their couches. But there's lots of fun ways to define it, and lots of different ways to think about how we're going to play with it. I think while we've been working in this industry for many years, and metaverse and digital twins, and none of this is new, we're just interacting with it in new ways. I think the fun part is that we all get to continue to define it. And so if someone else comes up with a new and interesting way in which we're going to interact with this technology, we can certainly pivot to start to adopt it. So it's still very malleable at this point.
Okay. So as you probably recognize, that we only have one panelist now, and our other panelist had some technical difficulties and is joining us now. So I am going to add Kyle to our screen. And welcome, Kyle. Let's jump back a little bit to kind of the very beginning for you and have you go ahead and make sure you're unmuted and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody about you.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. And sorry for being late. Had fun internet from the storm issues. But I'm Kyle Morrand, CEO at 302 Interactive. We are a digital experiences company that focuses on using game design to bring play into the real world. We've been doing it for 10 years this month. It's our birthday next week, so that's going to be fun. Um, Started at UCF here in Orlando, learning game design, and then learned how to like tinker with VR and a little bit of AR, and took that from working in the military to attractions with Universal and get to fly out to Japan. And I've done everything from healthcare education to attractions to military work, all with the same focus of how do we take this game engine, this real-time technology, and apply it to the real world. So appreciate you guys having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining and thanks for sticking with it this morning. So let me ask you a little bit. You mentioned the variety of different areas that your company does work in, but I think it all, if I understand correctly, you guys are really focused on promoting everyday play. Talk a little bit about what that means and how that, goes into things where you wouldn't necessarily think a healthcare product or a defense project would be a play aspect, but talk a little bit about how you incorporate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I have this quote that I like to tell my team and everybody. The opposite of work is not play, or sorry, the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. And I really like that quote because it kind of alludes to this idea that, as kids, we play and we interact and all of these things, and then we sort of lose that like play aspect adults, because we feel like we got to be serious and everything has to be, perfect and focused and organized. Um, but we end up losing this sort of creativity and this aspect of interaction with the real world and with each other when we start to remove this play aspect. So from our perspective as designers, what we look to do is utilize the interactions that you see in game design and those elements of playfulness, whether it's just little pop, pop, smoke, bang when you're doing certain things. Or really diving deep into like the game loops and the interaction loops, and how can we apply that to something in healthcare or something with the government during their training experience. And there's really two benefits to that. One, you get more of an enjoyable experience, but two, we find a lot of times that when you get into a state of play, you end up in this state of flow, and there's a little bit more retention. So when you're doing things like safety training, and you really need to remember this training, it's much better to from reading it in a book to let me go and interact with it and have that level of retention. So that's a lot of what we found in that kind of design. So we call it everyday play because for us, it's about taking that playful design and applying it to everyday life.
Interesting. Now, Kyle, talk a little bit about how the industry, the AR, VR mixed, all of that has evolved in the time since you've been in it, which really isn't all that long in the grand scheme of things, but it's evolved immensely. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I am 31, so I got into this when I was 20, and I got to work with a great gentleman, Stu Armstrong, when I was 21. And one of the first projects he had me do was to take one of the old VR headsets that was just like this box and put two webcams on it and turn it into this AR experience. And I was like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Um, but we did. We hacked together essentially like a very crude version of the Apple Vision Pro, but 11 years ago. For healthcare, we were trying to help folks with prosthetics be able to walk better and have a better sense of like walking through augmented reality training. But it was scrappy and R&D and very there was no book, there's nothing to read, there's no guide, there's no manual. It was just figure it out and do it. And so I kind of call that area of XR just the R&D phase of where things were at. And I think it was like that for a long time, as far as Stu told me. But I've seen now, especially as we've gotten like the Quest 2, the Apple Vision Pro, where we're getting to this like early maturation state where you're almost having like from a game's perspective the Nintendo 64 moment where it's not games for everyone yet. Not everybody's doing it yet, but the people that love it, they really love it and it's accessible for them. And it's really strong opportunity from an entertainment perspective, from a business perspective to understand what do those folks that are in AR and VR really enjoy and start making content for them, start making experiences for them. Because we're getting to that early maturation state where people are going to start just adopting more and more,
Yeah.
which is exciting.
Now, Sheena, talk a little bit about um, um, how filmmakers can kind of adopt some of this AR and VR technology into what they're traditionally doing.
Well, so let me start with my daydream, because going through the Disney Accelerator, I essentially got to daydream quite a bit, and it was one of the most amazing experiences that I had. And coming from a film background, my brain just started to look at how could we use this if the medium was different, if it was more convenient, what could we do? And so obviously, having worked in locations as long as I have, honestly, my brain couldn't stop thinking about what if we could start to leverage this to start to layer potential sets on different locations. And so as you're trying to get your director to sign on and your producer to sign on to different locations, you're able to allow them to visualize what it's going to look like fully dressed. You can start to layer that in. When you look at actors on a stage working with CGI characters, being able to do several reps where they're going to be able to interact with them and fully see the characters instead of having to just imagine it in their brains. And we're starting to get there with some of those things, but the more that we can shrink the technology so it melts, and we talk about that a lot, is like, you hit this golden point when people stop remembering they have something on their face and they're just fully in it. The more we can get that tech to melt and you get just the full immersion, that's when we're going to start to hit those really peak areas where we can start to leverage this technology.
And now I've read just a little bit of a tangent from that and what Kyle said earlier. I've read a little bit about adoption of the technology, and I read in an article equating it to going from SD to HD in terms of the industry. And one of the things they said is that one of the challenges right now is for groups to participate or have the experience with the VR. They're taking themselves out of the community, because then they put something on their head and they're not there with their friends and families in their own living room or whatever. I mean, is there ever like, how do you see the community aspect of the technology, kind of molding into where it's a little bit less isolated?
Well, I think there's two folds to that. I'm not as deep as Kyle is into this in terms of VR, but there's a lot of people that find their people in VR, right?
Okay.
And they're isolated from society because they don't interact the same way with people around them, and maybe they're too far away, but in VR, they can be in the same space together. And so it's not always you put it on and you're isolated. Sometimes going into that other world is connecting you in ways that were never possible before. Now, me personally, I like AR because I like interacting with both the people around me because I'm social and these digital assets at the same time. And so for me, that's the party. That's the real stuff. When I can start to add in the animations and the unreal, right? That all the impossible things that we can get from entertainment, plus all my favorite people around me, that's the good stuff for me.
And how are your kids your focus group?
with the entertainment stuff, my kids played a very big part in what we were able to deliver to Disney and still working on. They spent a lot of time with me on it, but it was fun because most of our work at Red 6 is defense based, and
Right.
I'm the only non-pilot on my team. I'm the only female on my team, so I'm usually adding the other perspective. But when it got to themed entertainment, I was able to look at everybody. I was like, okay, here, expert. I'm the target audience. This is what I know. And it was really fun to turn it around. But even in the defense space, I've been shocked how much value I have. That didn't come out right, but you know what I mean? Like, not being a pilot, but my perspective from film and from everything that I've learned from people like Kyle and folks in the Orlando community that have taught me so much about VR and AR and game dev. I'm able to bring this completely different perspective, since most of our team that I work with is all pilots. I can have this alternative perspective that makes our product stronger.
Yeah. Now let's do a little bit of, I know we can't necessarily do the show part of it, but let's talk a little bit about some of your highlighted projects. Kyle, give us one or two projects that you just love, and explain the process and explain why you enjoyed them so much.
Yeah, that's a great question. The one I like to emphasize, I think it kind of sparked this everyday play concept for me. It was a project we did called Therapy. It's a VR physical therapy project for kids. And what I really enjoyed about it, at first it felt um, frustrating for my team, because we were asked to essentially, in physical therapy, you're moving one body part in one direction for 12 weeks in like a very monotonous rhythm, and we were asked, like, take this singular motion and make that fun. And that was like, okay, maybe. But as we went through the design process, we really focused in on, okay, the action that has to happen is the single range of motion, and we can build a system around that. So we took that process, we built a system to capture that motion using VR and a VR controller to effectively get range of motion, be able to measure that data, all the good stuff. But then we got to work with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds that are sitting in a white room, scared, concerned, not understanding what they have to do, right? In wheelchairs and all this stuff, frustrated, not wanting to be at the physical therapy office, and just kind of get to know them. We spent a lot of time getting to know kids and like where they were at, and what they enjoyed, and we took a lot of inspiration from that and started creating worlds. We created a beach environment, a forest environment, a few different environments that kids could interact with, playing games with fruit, and with we had one scene where a dolphin was swimming back and forth, and now you're playing beach volleyball with the dolphin as it swims back and forth. And to watch kids then put that on and interact with it and have fun in this environment that they're not having fun at all, was awesome. But even more so than what became really exciting for us was the physical therapists themselves. Not only were they able to use this tool to measure without having to use like traditional range of motion measurement tools, but they were able to work with multiple kids at the same time, because all the kids are now in VR. So you could have 3, 4 kids. And instead of the therapist focusing on the measuring, writing things down, all the stuff, the system took care of that. All the data took care of that. So now the physical therapists, they could do what they really wanted to do, of just take care of the kids and have fun with them and see how they were doing. Did you like the game? And you could see them light up as well and have that interaction. So it created this sort of what we call like a magic circle experience between the physical therapists and the kids, that really was like a magical moment that for us was like, wow, this, okay, so now we can take game design and technology and apply that and create this magic circle for people in their business context. Where else can we do that? Where else can we apply it? No, yeah, that was a really fun project for us.
Yeah, where was that 15 years ago when I had shoulder surgery? Because those 6 months were the most excruciatingly painful physical therapy of my life.
Yeah.
Sheena, tell me a little bit about one of your favorite projects.
My favorite project to date was working on the Disney Accelerator, and we got that program's really amazing, but they gave us 2 weeks to put augmented reality on a roller coaster outdoors, and it had never been done before. And that's my favorite kind of project. Like, cool, high stakes, never been done. Yes. And thankfully I'm with a team that has like-minded crazy ideas. So we did it, and we went from, and it was in a hurricane, lost power, and I'm pitching the creators of The Incredibles on the script, and that was fine. That was totally normal to, you know, have a flashlight as my only source of light to be able to communicate on that call. But they loved it, and the tech team and I partnered between scripting and creating the technology, and we got them in there. I think they got like 8 hours, like 2 mornings of 4 hours where they could actually work on the actual roller coaster before we had cameras so that we could debut it at demo day. But we knew that if we could do this on a fighter jet where we leverage all 6 degrees, that we could probably do it on a track that we knew where it was going at all times. It had just never been done. So it was dirty. It was an Air Force helmet on the Incredicoaster in LA, but it worked and it was flawless. And now I just need them to buy it. So that's what I'm working on now.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Kyle, you know, let's go back. I don't even know whether it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. Why did you get into this field? And how did you get into it?
Oh man. On accident. Through a
That's how,
series of through a
okay.
series of accidents. Yeah, so I've actually been a musician since I was 9. Play percussion and piano, and did that from 9 to 18, so all middle school and high school. My mom was actually the IT director at my middle school and my high school, and what that meant for me was that she did all the IT stuff, all the fun stuff, all the coding classes and all that stuff. And so I didn't want to hang out with my mom, so I didn't do any of that stuff. I had no interest in doing any technology stuff. But then when I went to college, I was like, well, I guess that's what I should probably do because I know it pretty well. So I did computer engineering for the first 2 years at UCF. But again, I'd spent my whole life being a musician. And my second year of college, I remember spring semester, I think I failed 3 classes because I was just so what I learned later, depressed. I didn't have my creativity. I didn't have any, I was just doing work to be done and I wasn't enjoying it. And I was just like dragging. And I remember that semester I went to the library and I always loved to read and do some random stuff. And so I picked up some books on game design because I was just curious and I taught myself like 3 different game engines over the summer. Got really inspired by that. And that kind of led me to like a rigmarole of like, okay, I am really enjoying this game stuff and I'm really not enjoying engineering. I'm just going to switch. So I switched majors, switched to game design at UCF, and met a bunch of cool friends. Those cool friends became my founders for 302. We started a couple games and student projects and then kind of just rolled into that. And so that was maybe like that first big spark. And then the second one of my professors introduced me to my now mentor, Stu, and was like, you should go to an intern for this guy. He's a wacky guy. You'll have some fun with that. And I was really hesitant at first because I was going like from this games direction to like, oh, you're going to go work on military projects. That can't be fun. But Stu made it a very enjoyable environment of taking technology, applying it to the real world, but using game design practices to make that possible. And that's where I really first learned about that concept. So
Cool. That's cool. I like the non-traditional path, you know,
yeah,
bouncing around. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, not a lot in life happens on schedule and on the original timeline. So that's pretty cool.
for sure.
Okay, everybody in the audience, like we got like 1 or 2 more formal questions. But if you have some questions for Kyle or Sheena, go ahead and start using the hand raising function. And I'll call on you in a few minutes. If you can't find the hand raising function, sometimes people can't find it, go ahead and just shoot me a quick message in the chat to let me know that you have a question and I will call on you there. Sheena, so I wanted to talk to you because, I mean, the technology field has been something you were passionate about long before you moved over to Red 6. Talk about, and we as an industry are constantly talking about the merging of kind of the traditional content creation and the version that you're in right now. Give me a lesson on how we should better explain to the world how our 2 content creation industries work together.
Well, it's something that I think has been inevitable in all creative fields. As new technology is created, the crazies that work in these industries find new ways to create the impossible, right? And so there's always going to be the foundational traditional roles, but what we have to do as an industry is continuously understand how these tools can improve our craft. And if we gatekeep and say no, can't try anything new, somebody else is going to do it for us. And so that became a really big obsession of mine, having come from traditional film production, of this intersection of entertainment and technology, and how can we better empower these extraordinary professionals who've been doing this their whole lives, and start to create new stories with new things that people can experience. And at the end of the day, most of us do this because we want to create memories. We want to create these magical moments. And whether it's a commercial or a feature, or it doesn't really matter. We're telling these stories in different ways. And I think when you looking at Lindsay's background at View, that's an extraordinary first step into this merging, right? Where you have a game engine that's running the backgrounds of everything that she's done, but you have still all of the traditional production aspects happening in front. And so it's this really beautiful orchestration of how technology can empower storytelling. It can empower the traditional film production to be able to create things in new ways. And no one, and there's a couple film commission folks on here, the hardest thing is when you're talking to a producer or director, and they've got these great big ideas, but their budget limits what they're capable of doing, right? And what if tech can help them tell this story in a meaningful way without having to do 6 company moves, right? That is just going to blow their budget out of the way. And you can leverage all of these things here. That's, I think, the beautiful thing about how, if we open our eyes to tech. And I came in literally not knowing anything and leaned on folks like Kyle in the community and said, I'm here to learn. Like, what do I need to know? How do I figure this out? Never in a million years would I think I'd be working at a tech company, but tech is still so malleable that we need people that are just curious. We need people that are willing to, and I love the way Kyle describes it, play, because that's how you move these things forward. So the more that we play with it, the more we're going to understand it. And I don't even think we've scratched the surface on the potential of this intersection of tech and entertainment.
So if somebody has questions, can they contact you and just say, hey, okay, all right.
Always.
Okay. A quick question, I think clarification from the chat box. Sheena, when you said the only pilot on the team, you mean actual, or non-pilot, you mean actual like person that doesn't fly for a living, right?
Yeah. I work with most of my team flew F-22s for the U.S. Air Force. I've got one Marine, but they're all former fighter pilots.
Okay. So Sheena, I want to stick with you. A piece of advice. Let's say, someone in our audience, probably if they're here today through Film Florida, they're not working in the tech side of the industry. They're probably a little bit more on the traditional side. But somebody's really interested now in maybe making a transition or maybe incorporating more. Where do they start? Where do they go from here?
Yeah, well, similar to those that know me know I'm an association gal. Film Florida was always a big thing for me, and Women in Film and Television was the other association I loved. But there's great associations on the tech and game and VRAR side. So there's the VRARA, Virtual Reality Augmented Reality Association. It becomes a blur when you say it together, where you can start to meet people and go to these events and go to sessions like this where you can ask these questions and start to understand. Because to me, that's how I've learned, right? Has been meeting people, it's been through community. And truth be told, my first VRARA meeting where we did it in virtual reality, I got stuck in the corner and I could not figure out how to get out. And the entire group watched me hit a corner because I didn't know what to do with any of these game tools. But you know what? They're really kind people. So they helped me figure it out. So the next time I didn't have to stand in the corner the whole meeting. It's still not VR is not my main medium, but you know, I'm humble and trying to figure it out and understanding that I'm gonna get it wrong. But the more that I spend time in this and the more that I meet people in the community, they're so willing to help you understand how to make it work for you. And so I just talk to people, start asking, and I'm happy to be an intro for anyone in this group.
Cool. Now, Kyle, kind of the same question for you in terms of, is there specific software that people should, start familiarizing themselves with, whether they want to incorporate it or whether they want to change, the direction of their career? Kind of give us some of the buzz terms in software and some of the things that you work on.
Yeah, yeah. I think the big one is the game engine itself. Unity is a great tool for jumping in and getting started. There's a bunch of great resources on like templates and just learning material. And then I'd say like especially for you guys, like the virtual production space, Unreal, another great tool, another great bunch of templates. So Unity and Unreal, both game engines. I think just doing the tutorials, the getting started, the Hello Worlds, those are all good places to start. But I think as well that getting into a lot of the 3D creation tools. Blender's one big one that sticks out to most people. Um, I think I'm a big fan of like learning before you start paying for things. So just jump into the free resources, jump into free tools. You might have to change later, and that's okay for your job. But yeah, I would say Blender, Unity, Unreal is like the big three to really just get started and really just start making stuff. And I think to Sheena's point, go out to events and meet people, but even more so, when you start making something, really make something small and put it on the internet and just share with people and do it as fast as possible. If you can do it in the same day or in the same week, like don't make the 3-month projects, don't try to scope, blah, blah, blah. Like just make, there's a great donut tutorial that I always tell people to do in Blender. Do the donut tutorial, make it your own, put it online, show people. Like just do those small projects. And I'll say, especially if you're like trying to change careers, there's one of the guys on my team, his name's Tyler, and I always tell people this story. I remember I used to interview with everybody, and Tyler's resume, he linked to this YouTube channel where for 4 months, every day, he just posted a video of just something he was working on. And I watched like 2 months of those videos, and I didn't join the interview. I just told him like, Eric, if you like this guy, just hire him because like he does the thing. Like, so just make stuff, and share it with people. You'll get good feedback.
Because a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is you can't really put that on a resume, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Christy, I saw that you had a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I got to find you here, and I'm going to add the spotlight so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hey. Hi, everybody. So it seems like Orlando has had like a really great tech hub strength building up over the past couple decades. Would you say that there are certain areas that have emerged, and like what would be some other than the Orlando area?
Great question.
Sheena.
Great question. Orlando does have a really strong tech entertainment focus, and it's not by accident. When you look at the DNA of Orlando, it was really started pre-Disney by the Florida Technological University that was created to help the engineers take man to the moon with NASA. So pre-Disney, it was an engineering background that Orlando was founded on. And that as you look at the two main industries that grew up around it, with defense simulation and themed entertainment, that's why there's such a giant presence here. Now that bleeds out into a lot of different technologies across the state. I'm obviously most well-versed on the Orlando, but you start to look at Miami and where Kyle's from, and there's a huge fintech presence down there. Tampa's got some great startup culture, but I know Orlando the most, and I've been bragging about Orlando for so long now. You see a lot of great tech around the state. When you look at the entertainment tech, Orlando really has the highest concentration of those here.
And I think that answers my question, because I basically just, the way production kind of like swarms of crew end up in the same areas. And so there are like, pockets that are busier than others. And it just seems like tech has really grown in that area. So I was wondering how purposeful that was,
Yeah, it's all based on, the ability to find community and work, right? And so Kyle's part of a really extraordinary group of people that have been collaborating as they were startups over the past 10 years, right? And they all started in shared space. And it was interesting, when I was at the OEP, they would come to me and they're like, well, we need pizza. Like, we've gathered all of these professionals, we've gathered all of these students, and we're doing these things, but we can't afford pizza. It was like, I'm sorry, what? You did all the hard work. Yes, I will find money to give you pizza, right? Like, I think what I fell in love with Orlando culture is that it's very collaborative, and the game dev, VRAR community really mirrored what I first fell in love with film in Orlando. It was that it's the same thing. We find ourselves in this place and we want to do cool things, and we're willing to help each other make it.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I have another question, if you don't mind, John. So how much of this, it's kind of a twofold question, but like looking at the education sphere in Orlando, because this kind of tech, I imagine, has a lot of changes rapidly, and a lot of developments rapidly. Are the local businesses focused in tech? Like, do they work closely with the universities to make sure that the up and coming talent is learning the things that are going to be like at the forefront of development in the future? And then also, is this industry reliant on students coming from university, or are some people developing those talents on their own if they're like really into coding on their own, or like how much of it is funneled through the universities?
Yeah, it's a good mix, I think. At least what I've seen. So I come from UCF, but I get to work with like Full Sail a lot as well. And I think it's a bit of a challenge that they're aware of as well. It's like you said, like the technology is changing faster than the university can respond to. But some of the great teachers that we've been able to work with are focused a lot on just teaching students how to learn, because they're aware like what you're learning right now, it's not going to apply at the end of the semester. But if we teach you the process of learning the tools, then you can jump into the workforce and learn the tools. And those are the folks that I've been able to work with and hire as students. But a lot of times, especially on the coding side, it's usually more of this like hobby passion, or hobby passion rather, that a student will come out of and have all these side projects and all these things. They've done the game jams and they've done, all the hackathons, and that really was what makes their portfolio shine. So I think university is definitely one part of like learning to learn and learning that process. But doing the work, doing the projects, doing the side projects has been like a big, I think, push that the universities have a hard time providing space for. It's definitely a mix of both on the education side, and I'm a little encouraged. I got last year a chance to listen to Dr. Cartwright, the president at UCF, and he had this really good talk about how he wants industry and the university to work more regularly together. That he would love to see employers be able to send employees to a class for a semester and be able to do that with ease. And that process from a university perspective is actually really difficult because of the degree program and all of these things. Like, it's a more difficult challenge to just send somebody back to school. Even for myself, I'm 3 classes away from my bachelor's and never finished. And the process for me to just jump back into that is very time consuming and difficult. It's not a smooth process, so most people don't do it. But he's hoping to find ways to like break down that barrier. So I think on the educator side, they are aware of it and they're trying to find paths forward. But it's an old system that has to be revitalized.
And that's where Full Sail, being a private university, has a bit more nimble options, like they can move a bit faster. And it's over the years, I've spent a lot of time connecting those two universities, UCF and Full Sail, to help each other. The presidents wanted to understand, how do we learn from each other? How do we do this? And I've had the head of the board of trustees from UCF tell me, we're just not going to be able to move fast enough on something regarding evolving the curriculum for technology and the talent pipeline. And she's like, it breaks my heart, but try Full Sail. They can probably move faster. So it's great when you start to see, and the relationship between those two universities has improved over the past decade. That's what you need in a community, because it shouldn't be about ego. It should be about serving the people. And I totally agree with Kyle. When I talk to students, there's a lot of times at Full Sail, I'll tell them, you do not need to go here. Like, and I can stand next to the president of the university and say that, and he's totally okay. Because in these industries, like the person that Kyle said, who like just did the work on their own, you can learn this stuff without going to school. Going to a school like Full Sail gave me confidence in the industry. I had already worked in the industry. I didn't need, in hindsight, I didn't need it, but I got community and I got confidence. But it's some students need different things, but it's certainly something you can learn on your own.
Not too much unlike the production industry again.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
thank you all.
Thanks, Christy. And I mean, the other thing, you guys kind of touched on this, but like it's the old adage of like, someone will call me now and say, I'm looking to buy a camera. Should I buy this one or this one or this one? And it's like, don't get fixated on the technology, because the minute you buy that camera, the minute you buy that camera, it's going to be outdated a month later. So, honestly, buy the cheapest one because you're going to waste your money in the long term. I mean, a lot of that is the same thing in your industry, right? The technology is always changing. So it's more important to know how to do it as opposed to what you're finishing with, right?
I love what Kyle said, and this is something on the boards that I serve on for universities. The more that we can teach young people how to learn is the future, because the tech moves way too fast. But when they're prepared to problem solve, we're not only preparing them for industry, we're preparing them for life.
Yeah, I think on the VR side, I'm a big fan of not buying toys. I love to buy all the toys, all the different technologies. But if somebody really wants to learn VR, make a Google Cardboard project. Go find a Google Cardboard somewhere and make a Google Cardboard project, because you'll learn the fundamentals of how VR actually works in a way that I think is a little too masked with like a Quest. You don't really get to learn that there's like a magnetometer and a gyroscope and an inertial measuring unit that moves you through 3D space. And when you capture that concept, then you like, oh, now I really understand VR. And then you can apply that to any device. So it's really like just those fundamentals. Like, don't buy the toys, just get the simplest thing and start there.
Yeah, good. Savage, you got your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Guys, thanks so much for sharing all this information with us. I'm up in Northwest Florida. I was curious, you mentioned a lot of military applications that you're working on currently. We have a huge Air Force presence up here. And I'm curious if there are opportunities in that space in this area. I'm a producer, do traditional production, but I've also recently been involved in a feature film, sort of an eco-adventure. We're exploring sort of entertainment and eco-tourism. And I'm interested in how AR, VR might play a role in that, because tourism is such a big part of Florida and our economy. And you're talking about theme parks, but I'm also thinking about, our wonderful environment and how to interact that. Maybe are there ways to, we have animated characters in our film. Is there a way to bring those characters and experiences into the real world environment around here and have kids interact in a way?
Well, I think that really, if you think about it, Pokemon Go was this great introduction into AR, MR, whatever. And it started, the it started getting more people involved. And honestly, I was kind of shocked when I learned it was just a vehicle to get more mapping data, but it worked because it was play, right? It was this huge play. And so we've been exploring, and I know we're not the only ones, but how do you leverage technologies like AR and MR to do different scavenger hunts, to bring real live environments to life? And a lot of it has been to do with the fact that most AR technologies, the way in which you view it, you lose a lot of the luminosity when you go outdoors. And that's something that Red 6 has really focused on. Our system is not ready to be a wearable in the everyday. We pull power from the plane, or from the roller coaster, right? But we got up to 18,000 nits, which is the equivalent of a cloud. So you can look directly outdoors. You can see everything. And now we're trying to backtrack to figure out, how do we adopt that technology to get it lighter, more nimble, so it can be something that we could carry, that we could just wear? Because I think that's a big barrier between being able to use this tech all the time and go out in the real world. It's isolated to rooms right now just because it needs to, so you could see the graphics.
Thank you.
Yeah, Savage, I shared a video and in the chat here. It's from a project that we did with the Marines last year. And it's not to show off our project, but something that happened at the very end of the project that is actually like a new thing to me. The Marines asked us for a trailer of our simulator, and we were like, oh, why? And for them, there's really two things. One, the simulation and most simulators that we do, they're not very accessible, right? Our simulator is like this big machine thing, and you wear VR and all this stuff, and so it's accessible for the people that have access to that. But they have to communicate to their stakeholders all around the country, and say, hey, like this thing is cool. So that was one aspect, because they needed something to show off, like, what is this thing, without just writing another document. And the trailer was really effective. But then as well, something that we're finding in the military as a whole is we built this simulator, we're working with the major and all these things, and then we get some of the Marines to come and test them, and these are 18 to 24-year-old kids that grew up playing video games, and that's their base expectation. And so from a military perspective and a recruiting perspective, the more you can now communicate and show, hey, this is interesting, this is engaging, this is something I can adapt towards. It makes for the military more compelling, right? On that side of things. And so they're finding that bringing in more animation and characters and what used to be bad words 10 years ago when I started, of making games in the military, is now like a positive trend. And so I think you might find as well up north, in the Air Force, that same trend starting to happen, where there is interest not only in just building these simulations and bringing that technology in, but also from a film perspective, helping them tell their stories and be able to communicate more effectively. And we're starting to see a lot more video like this kind of coming out of both the subcontractors and the military itself. So there might be an opportunity for you guys to get in there.
Thanks, Kyle. I'll take a look at that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Savage. Okay, Sheena, question is there a video of the Red 6 roller coaster?
I'm dropping it.
Okay.
Dropping.
All right. While we're doing that, I want Kyle, speaking of plugging things, plug away. Tell people how they can learn more, find you, anything you want people to be aware of, social media, websites, anything good.
Sure. Yeah. LinkedIn's my playground. I've kind of made LinkedIn my own, so we share a lot of content on there. We're actually trying to do more just teaching through LinkedIn, just sharing more of what we've learned as a team over the last 10 years. So that's like my primary space. 302 Interactive is the company, so we've got a YouTube and all of these things as well. But I would say primarily LinkedIn is the best place to find me and reach out as well. I'm happy to just talk and set up a call. And then I don't have it yet, but if you follow along in like the next month or so, we're actually starting a new socials account called Unbound, and it's really focused more towards creators as a whole, on educating how to get more involved in the space and then interactives and connecting with each other. So we're looking to kind of create that kind of community presence. So yeah, LinkedIn today, Unbound soon.
Sheena, how about you?
red6ar.com is our website. If you like plane videos, if you like pilot videos, Red6 CEO is my founder and CEO. He posts a lot of fun flying videos, but we're Red6AR on most social, so you can follow along there. But I'm hoping we can share more of our entertainment stuff. We haven't really been forward with that. So the link is in the chat, and I think I started at the time code, but it starts at 24. If you want to, all the videos, all these Disney Accelerator cohorts are online, so they're really fascinating. You get an insight to very cool tech, emerging tech. Like the class that was before us had the augmented reality contact lens. They've since defunded that program, but it was really cool to see what they were playing with and what they could think of. So they're really a fun time if you've got some extra time on your hands. It's a great introduction to technology.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's going to wrap up another edition of Film Florida Friday. Thanks to Sheena and Kyle for being with us. Thanks to all of you for joining us as well today. As always, thanks to Katie Collins for helping me wrangle and prepare for Film Florida Friday every month. We're going to be off for a few months for the summer, but we're going to be back in September with a new edition of Film Florida Friday. Be on the lookout for email blast and the information on social media coming in August. Thanks to all of our members for your continued support. If you're not a member of Film Florida, we hope you'll consider joining at filmflorida.org. Keep up with everything we're doing on our social media pages. Make sure you check out the Film Florida podcast, which is available on most major podcast outlets. Be sure you subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Thanks again for being here, everybody. Be safe and have a good summer.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, John.